Thank you, Andy, for that lovely talk about the law of attraction. It's very appropriate today because there's so much that we deny in the law of attraction that has to do with the wholeness of ourself. So this month we're exploring loving the shadow side. Ooh, it's a perfect theme for October, right? I posted a little clip on our Facebook page that has cats who are afraid of their shadows. So you can see them attacking and running away from and, arching their back and, from their shadow. And it made me think about how many of us, we all have a shadow, right? We have a shadow side. And we also have a shadow. You go out into the sun, you're going to see your shadow. Do you ever pay attention to your shadow? Sometimes, yes. Sometimes, no. Sometimes you forget. Sometimes you make little characters and, But it's always there. It doesn't go away. It's part of who we are. I love that it's Carl Jung, actually, who put the words down to what the shadow is. He was the one who had the initial exploration into the shadow. And what he said is that it contains all parts of ourselves that we have tried to hide or deny. It contains those dark aspects that we believe are not acceptable to our family, friends, and most importantly, ourselves. The message we get from this hidden place is simple. There's something wrong with me. I am not okay. I'm not lovable. I'm not deserving. I'm not worthy. And so I've been exploring this book, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers. And this is all about exploring our shadow. And this is from Debbie Ford. And I was reading this lovely book while I was in Mexico. So I went to Mexico this last week. I went to a ministers' convention, which was amazing. I had a lot of really, really good times. And when I arrived at our hotel, I don't know if you know, but Mexico time is different from American time. There's an attitude of getting around to things when you get around to things. And so we realized that Mexico time, we called it ish time. So if something's happening at 2, it's really happening at 2-ish. 2-ish, 2:30-ish. There's always the ish. So it's not really happening when you really think it's supposed to happen. We're very kind of like, want it now, right now, at this time. We start on time. And so I arrived at the Crystal Vallarta Hotel, and I had all my things. And by the way, it was, I think, like 99 plus 100% humidity. And so it's sweltering. And they had this, the registration desk was not inside, it was outside. It was covered, but I'm just like dripping, and I have all my suitcases. And I don't know if you know me, but I don't travel light, so I had like 4 suitcases as I was traveling. And I get to the counter and I talk to the guy, and I'm supposed to be rooming with one of my colleagues. And he looks at the paperwork, and I said, yeah, we're rooming together. And he said, oh no, you're not. And I said, oh yes, we are. And so then he starts wiping his brow, and he leaves. He leaves the front desk. He just walks away. So I'm there 20 minutes. My colleagues are checking in with other people. They're checking in, and he's just gone. And then he comes back and he says, oh, well, yeah, you're not, we don't have them rooming together. I said, well, can you make sure we're rooming together? Because we're supposed to be, splitting this room. And he said, well, the problem is that she paid for all inclusive and you didn't. And I said, well, can I pay for all inclusive? And he said, I don't know. And then he leaves again. And then it's 20 minutes later, and I'm like, where is he? Where did he just leaves. He just walks away. What happened to him? Then he comes back and he's sweating. And of course, I'm like, I'm a minister. It's my job. Like, he must be having a really hard time. It must be a really bad day. So I'm like, it's okay. It's okay, Oscar. It's all right. And he's sweating, and And he's there for another, 20 minutes. And I'm just like, what is going on? Like, so finally he's able to get me upgraded. And he said, well, no, he said, you're not in the room with her. And I said, well, what do you mean? I said, I paid this price. Are you going to charge me more? What's going on? He said, no, I'm not going to charge you more. You're going to be in separate rooms. And I was like, so you mean I'm going to have a separate room for the same price as it would be to be paired in the same room? And he said, yes. And I said, Oscar, that's okay. I'll take it. Thank you. But what I noticed from myself is while I'm sitting there doing the hokey pokey, trying not to be impatient, that I was impatient. And I had a little thing going in my head of like, what is his deal? What is going on with him? Why won't he communicate with me? I had all these things going on, right, inside of me. And do I want to admit that to you? No. I want to say, oh, I was so ministerial. Outwardly, I was ministerial. Inwardly, not so much. I was unhappy. I was grumpy. I was mad. I was impatient. And those are all aspects of my shadow self. Those are all the aspects that we pretend that none of us have, right? We hide from each other. We pretend that's not a part of who we are. Well, we're going to talk this month about exploring the shadow side, which means loving the aspect of yourself that you don't love. Loving the aspect of yourself that you don't want to tell anybody about, you don't want to admit to other people, wow, I'm a raging person whenever la happens. You don't want anybody to know that. You don't even want people to see that part of you. Well, we all have that. And so exploring that shadow side gives us the opportunity to poke into those areas of darkness that we don't want to look at, to shine the light on them, to not only admit that they're part of our being, but to love them. Now, it might be like, oh, that's easy. I could do that. Sure, no problem. Well, basically, the shadow is the person that you'd rather not be. And by integrating your shadow, you're going to discover a deeper source of your spiritual life. So we talk about very positive things at centers like this. We talk about focusing on the light, focusing on the good, focusing on the positive. And we do that, and we do it well. And we also forget to talk about loving that aspect of ourselves that isn't like that. And that's what I mean by wholeness. Whenever we talk about God, the universe is all that there is. When you really think about that, that means that God is that shooter that shot those people in Oregon. God is right there in the middle of that. In the bullet, in the death, in the destruction. How can we recognize that that's part of God? How can that be? That's the shadow side of who we are. And the more that we deny something, the more we push something away, the more it erupts in our face for us to start loving it. I want to ask you, is there a time in your life where you might have been violent? Have you ever maybe physically hurt somebody, including yourself? Is there an aspect of your being where that person is that hurt somebody, including maybe themselves, yourself? Is there an aspect of yourself that doesn't like that about you? Yeah. Well, that's the challenge. This is what I am encouraging you. I am challenging you this month to look at those parts of yourself that you don't like and start finding out what the gifts of that aspect of yourself is and start loving it. Now, it's not easy. I was thinking about what's the one thing. What are some things that I don't ever want to tell you about me? What we're doing the shadow. Let's get really get down and dirty. So I was reminded of a time 13 years ago, and at that time, my ex and I had separated, and I was very sad. I was very depressed and I was very confused. And I met a girl at a club a couple weeks before, and she randomly called me. She called me like 11 o'clock at night, and she calls me. She says, "I'm dancing in the city. I'm going to this club. I really want you there." And my insides were like, I don't want to drive up to the city and then go drinking, and then what am I going to do? And so I had this whole conversation, and inside of me I thought, no, I don't want to do this. And she said, "Oh, I really want you to be here." And so part of me wanted to be loved, and part of me wanted somebody to like me. And so I drove up to the city, even though I didn't want to go, because I thought maybe she liked me. Maybe I might have some kind of a relationship possibility. And so I went to the club, and there she was, and she had a group of friends, and she pretty much ignored me the whole time. And it was really awkward, and there was a lot of self-talk where I was already kind of upset and feeling like I was unlovable, but then I started really feeling unlovable. And I didn't know what to do except drink. So I did. I was at the club and I was drinking, and I was awkward, and I kept trying to talk to people, and it didn't work. I don't know if you've ever been in that situation. I feel like I'm usually a pretty good talker, but I was just in this place where I'm like, everybody is not resonating with me. And so I ended up talking with the bartender. The bartender was really great, and he was being very generous with my drinks, and I was talking to him more and more. And then at the very end of the night, they had last call, and he was like, "Oh, you want last call?" And I said, "Yes, give me a good one." And so he fills up a big glass, all alcohol. I swear it was like big glass, and I chugged it. And then it was the end of the night, and so I'm walking to my car, and I get in my car. And I don't really remember a lot of this, but I'm going to say I got in my car, and things were very blurry, and I was driving. And as things were very, very blurry, I was on the freeway, and I had a moment of clarity, which I kind of think is like a guardian angel. I had a moment of clarity that said, "You're drunk and you're driving and you can't see anything really, and you're on the freeway." And so I had enough clarity in that instant to pull over. And so I pulled over on the freeway. I didn't have enough clarity to turn my car off or the lights off, but I did park my car. And I pretty much passed out in my car until a policeman pulled up behind me. And then he came to my window and he said, "Have you been drinking?" And I said, "Yes, obviously." And he said, "Do you want to drink some more?" And then I used some expletives, and I said, "Blank, no, I'm not feeling very good at all right now." And so he did all the tests on me, and then he arrested me for drinking and driving. And that was 13 years ago. I got a DUI. And no, I don't want to talk about that in front of you, because I have that big thing inside of me of, what are you going to think about me? There's an aspect of me that doesn't like that I did that. There's an aspect of me that realizes I was so hurt and so uncomfortable that all I did was drink to cover it up. And then I have to turn around and say, I bet other people have eaten to cover up their emotions, have drank, have done drugs, have abused their body, have done things like that to cover up their emotions. I bet I'm not the only one. And I bet I'm pretty darn lucky that I didn't hit any other cars, because I very well could have. So why do I tell you this now? I'm telling you this because there is that dark part of myself that I need to learn to love. There is a part of myself that I think that I'm not enough, that I think I'm undeserving, and I think I'm unlovable. And until I look at myself and love myself and admit that to myself, I cannot accept the fullness of my being. Now, the way that you can find out those aspects of yourself that you might be denying, because a lot of people will go through this shadow work and think, oh, I have nothing. I'm good. I am so clean. I did 20 years of therapy. There is nothing for me to work on. Well, what the law of attraction is what you resist persists. So there might be something coming up in your world that keeps coming up in your world. Like, for instance, you keep noticing the drunk person on the street and you're judging them, right? Oh my God, I can't believe can't they get a job? Can't they? If you start getting hooked by something out there, that's showing you the aspect of yourself that you don't like. It's showing you the aspect of yourself, your shadow side that you don't want to look at. And it keeps coming up for you and keeps coming up into your face until you can acknowledge that that's part of you. If we live in a world that is infinite, if God is all that there is, and God makes up every single one of us, that means that whatever's going on out there is a reflection of what's going on in here. So as long as we have violence and we have deep hatred for ourselves, we're going to see it show up out in the world. We're going to see it show up out in the world. So how are we going to heal the world? We're going to start working on healing ourselves. The purpose of discovering our shadow is for us to make peace with the contradictory aspects of ourselves. We need to forgive ourselves for being imperfect and to recognize what we do to others, we do to ourselves. Everything you speak, say, and do is a reflection of yourself, and everything that's coming at you is a reflection of yourself. So by embracing your darkness, that's where you can actually find the happiness you've been longing for. When I see somebody else, which I love and acknowledge myself. I am not perfect. I am perfect in the fact that imperfection is perfection, right? And in the ideal world, I am not perfect because I have anger, I have hatred, I have judgment. If I can love that I have judgment, if I can see that there's a gift in the judgment, then I can start not judging. Do you get that? Our book of the month, Debbie Ford, said that she was at a leadership seminar, and the woman looked at her and said, "You're a bitch." And she was like, oh, her heart sank. She thought, how did this woman know? She was like, I knew who I was, but I was desperately trying to get rid of that aspect of myself. Desperately. Well, why was she trying to get rid of that? The seminar leader said, what you don't own owns you. And then she asked, what's so good about being a bitch? And Debbie thought, nothing. Who wants to be a bitch? Nobody. And the seminar leader kind of probed her and said, well, what if you own a house and you're having renovations done? And the contractors are 3 weeks late. They're charging you twice what they said that they would charge you, and they still haven't delivered anything. Do you think it's appropriate, after you've been nice for so long, to start being a bitch? And she said, yes. So there is a place for that. And Debbie said, yes. And she said, do you think you could have the gift of standing in your power? Do you think maybe that's what you think the bitch is when you're standing in your power? Is it possible that you can do that and love yourself, even if people are upset about it? And she thought, well, yeah. And she said, well, why don't you own being a bitch then? Own it. And all her life, she had denied that aspect of her being. And she realized, you know what? It's okay. And when she had realized that it was okay for her to be that aspect of her being that she didn't like, she started loving herself. And then she started loving the people who she thought were being bitchy to her because she got it. And she loved herself, And all of a sudden, that wasn't an issue for her. So this is the kind of secret sauce, the secret thing that we're doing to try and figure out how to be enlightened beings. The enlightenment isn't in the light. The enlightenment is in the darkness. Deepak Chopra said, within every human being there are gods and goddesses in embryo with only one desire. They want to be born. And Ayurvedic doctor Vasland Lad says, within every drop is the ocean, and with every cell is the intelligence of the whole body. So if you're inspired by somebody's courage, it's a reflection of the courage within you. If you're impatient with somebody's slowness, it's because you're impatient with yourself when you're slow. I invite you to look at everybody around you, especially the people who annoy you, and say to yourself, that person is me. So that is your homework this week, is to look around you and find the people that don't necessarily float your boat, and to find out, that person is me. How is that person me? And then what I want you to do is find out if there's any way you could love yourself being that way. Is there any way you could love yourself? Debbie saw a woman who was screaming at her child in the station, in the bus station. And she said, I would never do that. And then she thought, that woman is me. How is that woman me? And she thought of, well, if I had a brand new white suit on that was very expensive, and I had a child who spilled chocolate milk on me just before I was walking out the door to go to work, I would be mad and I would yell at that child. And so that person is me. And when she started realizing that that person is her, she started loving everybody exactly as they are and exactly who they are, just like they are. And then she realized she was loving herself exactly as she is. Don't you think that's the secret of life? Don't you think that's Jesus and Buddha and all of our great spiritual teachers? They were at one meant, right? They were at one with what is. And what is exactly what is meant to be, because it is what is happening now. It's the perfect and most perfect, amazing, glorious thing to ever happen, because it's what is happening. So once we start accepting what is exactly as it is, that's where our freedom is. We're not resisting or wanting or seeking or desiring something that's not there. We're being with what is exactly present right now. So I want to encourage you to step into this new idea, to start looking at your shadow and start finding the gifts in it. What is it that does for you, and how can you love yourself because of it? That's what I challenge you to do this week. And it may not be easy work, but I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it because it is the light that we will find in the darkness that will give us enlightenment. So let's do it. Are you taking me on this week?
Yes.
All right. I'm taking it on this week. So I promise you that it's going to be a great, magnificent week. A week filled with love and light. A light in the darkness. And so let's pray.